Mohenjo-daro, the lost city of the Indus. 5,000 years ago, while most of humanity lived in mud huts and drank from rivers, a city where every single house had its own bathroom, where underground sewage pipes carried waste away from homes through a drainage system so advanced that Europe would not build anything like it until the Roman Empire. This city had no king, no palace, and yet 40,000 people lived there in what may have been the most organized society the ancient world had ever seen. They vanished, and they left behind a written language that no one on earth can read. This is the story of Mohenjo-daro, the scorching heat of the Sindh Desert in what is now Pakistan, a landscape of dust and silence under a relentless sun. Local farmers had plowed their fields around strange mounds of earth, finding broken bricks and bits of pottery. No idea what lay beneath their feet. The year was 1922, and the British Empire ruled over India, with archaeologists scouring the land for clues to ancient histories. One man, Rakhal Das Banerjee, an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India, was following a hunch based on earlier finds of seals with mysterious symbols. He arrived at the site called Mohenjo-daro, which means Mound of the Dead in the local Sindhi language, and he began to dig. What he uncovered would rewrite the history of human civilization. Was not just an archaeologist, he was a storyteller piecing together fragments of a forgotten world. As his team brushed away the sand, walls of baked brick, perfectly aligned streets, and layers of ancient city life was so monumental that it quickly drew the attention of Sir John Marshall, the director, General of the Archaeological Survey of India. Marshall, a seasoned scholar who had worked on sites across the subcontinent, recognized immediately that this was something unprecedented. Large-scale excavations, bringing in teams of workers and experts to peel back the centuries. The sheer scale of the city began to emerge, a metropolis covering over 250 acres, with neighborhoods, public buildings, intricate water management system. Only the beginning. Picture this ancient city at its peak, around 2,500 years before the Common Era. While the pyramids were rising in Egypt and the first cities of Mesopotamia were thriving, Mohenjo-daro was a marvel of urban planning. The streets were laid out in a precise grid pattern, with main avenues running north to south and east to west, some as wide as 30 feet. Every house, from the smallest dwelling to the largest complex, was connected to a centralized drainage system. Channeled wastewater from indoor bathrooms into covered sewers under the streets, which emptied into the Indus River. This level of sanitation was unheard of in the ancient world, a testament to a society that valued public health and order above all else. But who were the people who built this city, and how did they manage such complexity without the trappings of kings or emperors? Haunted the archaeologists as they dug deeper. Sir John Marshall, in his seminal work The Indus Civilization, described finding no grand palaces or temples, no statues of rulers, of a centralized military force. They uncovered a great bath, a large public pool lined with bitumen to make it waterproof, possibly used for ritual purification. They found granaries for storing grain, workshops for craftsmen, and standardized weights and measures that suggested a highly regulated economy. Seemed to function like a well-oiled machine, governed by consensus or a council of elders, a mystery that continues to baffle scholars today. The excavations continued into the 1930s under the leadership of Ernest Mackay, archaeologist who brought meticulous detail to the work. Uncovered more neighborhoods, more artifacts, and more of the enigmatic seals that bore the undeciphered script of the Indus Valley. Made of steatite, depicted animals like bulls and unicorns, and they were inscribed with short sequences of symbols. No one has cracked the code of this writing system, despite countless attempts by linguists and code breakers. It is one of the greatest puzzles in archaeology, a silent language waiting to be heard. Remember that fact because it comes back later in the most intriguing ways. Pause for a moment and consider the impact of this discovery on the world of archaeology. When Sir John Marshall first published his findings, his colleagues, by claiming that Mohenjo-daro and its sister city Harappa represented a civilization as old as, if not older than, Egypt and Mesopotamia. But here is where it gets even more astonishing. While Egyptian cities often grew organically around temples and palaces, Daro was meticulously planned from the ground up. Its bricks were uniformly sized, baked in kilns to withstand the elements, and its buildings showed a remarkable consistency in design. It was not a city that evolved by chance, it was a city that was engineered, of collective imagination and skill thousands of years ahead of its time. Walking those ancient streets, hearing the clatter of carts on brick roads, smelling the smoke from pottery kilns, play in courtyards with terracotta toys. Archaeologists have found evidence of a vibrant culture with jewelry made of gold and carnelian, pottery painted with geometric patterns for games. Of Mohenjo-daro traded with distant lands, as evidenced by seals found in Mesopotamia, and they lived in relative peace, sign of warfare or conflict. For all its sophistication, the city holds dark secrets, secrets that begin to surface as the layers are peeled away. But what happened next would shock even the most seasoned archaeologists. As the excavations revealed more of the city, questions multiplied. Why did such an advanced civilization leave no written history we can read? How did they maintain such social order without apparent rulers? Chillingly, what caused their sudden decline? These are open loops we will return to, threads in a tapestry that is still being woven. For now, consider the scale of achievement, a city of 40,000 souls living in harmony with nature, managing water resources with canals and wells, and building for eternity. Of Banerjee, Marshall, and Mackay opened a window into a world that challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient human progress. It was just the tip of the iceberg. The more they dug, the more mysteries they uncovered. From mass graves to evidence of flooding, of a catastrophe that may have swept this civilization away. We delve into that darkness, we must understand the daily life of Mohenjo-daro, the people who called it home, cultural achievements that made it unique. That journey takes us into the heart of the city, where every brick tells a story, and every artifact whispers of a lost golden age. Shock, however, was yet to come, a revelation hidden in the very soil that preserved this ancient marvel for millennia. At the edge of discovery, the first glimpse of a city that defied expectations. Now we step inside its walls. Imagine for a moment you are a traveler from a distant land, walking towards Mohenjo-daro for the first time around 4,500 years ago. You see is not a haphazard jumble of huts, not a chaotic maze of alleys. Instead, you see geometry. You see order on a scale the ancient world had never before conceived. You are looking at the work of the greatest city planner the ancient world ever produced. This is not an opinion. It is a fact written in every brick, every drain, with a simple, revolutionary idea. The street grid, from a vantage point high above, the city reveals its master plan. Main streets, some over 30 feet wide, run perfectly north to south and east to west, dividing the entire lower city into massive blocks. Smaller lanes branch off, providing access to individual homes. This was not an organic growth. It was a blueprint laid down before the first brick was ever fired. It was a conscious declaration of a new kind of urban living, for harmony and efficiency that would not be seen again until the rise of the Roman Empire thousands of years later. Archaeologist Sir John Marshall, who led excavations in the 1920s, stood in the middle of these streets and wrote of a civic organization so mature, so far ahead of its time, it felt alien. But there it was. This grid was more than just convenient, of a living organism. It dictated the flow of air, of people, of goods, and most critically, of water, a sense of shared space and shared responsibility. There were no grand processional ways leading to a towering palace, no monuments to a single king. The architecture served the people, not a personality. The entire city was oriented to the cardinal directions, a feat requiring sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Why this obsession with right angles and straight lines? Was it for defense, for social control, for spiritual alignment? Maybe all of the above. Imposed a quiet, pervasive order. It prevented the claustrophobic, fire-prone tangles of contemporary Mesopotamian cities, allowed sunlight and the prevailing winds to sweep through the neighborhoods. In essence, the first known exercise in urban public health. And this is only the beginning. The city was divided into two distinct sections, speaks to a complex social mind. On the western side, raised on a massive artificial mound of mud brick and debris from earlier settlements, stood the citadel, ministrative and possibly the spiritual heart of Mohenjo-daro. A fortified castle in the medieval sense, but a raised platform containing the city's most monumental and enigmatic structures. From here, one could look out over the entire sprawling lower city, burnt brick rooftops and courtyard gardens stretching towards the Indus River. The separation was physical, but was it social? Were the people who worked on the citadel a priestly class, a council of elders, a guild of engineers? See the palaces of pharaohs or the ziggurats dedicated to single gods. What we see are public works, stunning of all sits, right on top of that citadel mound. So advanced, so perfectly engineered, that it remains the defining icon of this civilization. The Great Bath, a rectangular pool measuring 39 feet long, 23 feet wide, and 8 feet deep, built of finely sawn, standard-sized bricks laid in perfect courses. But these are not just any bricks. In gypsum mortar, and then the entire interior of the tank is lined with a layer of natural bitumen, a tar-like substance, applied with such precision that it made the bath completely watertight. That for a moment, 4,500 years ago, the engineers of Mohenjo-daro were using advanced waterproofing technology, was likely brought from distant sources, perhaps hundreds of miles away, specifically for this purpose. Aided courtyards surrounded the bath, with rooms on all sides, possibly for changing or ritual preparation. System of corbelled arches and drains allowed the bath to be emptied, cleaned with fresh water from a large well in an adjacent room. The attention to detail is breathtaking. The floor of the bath even slopes gently to a central drain, ensuring no standing water remained. What was this place for? Clearly not a public swimming pool for leisure. Most scholars, like the renowned Indus archaeologist Jonathan Mark Canoyer, believe it was a ritual space for purification ceremonies central to the city's spiritual life. A structure that speaks of a society obsessed with cleanliness, with water, with communal ritual performed in a space of stunning architectural purity. The Great Bath is a silent sermon on the values of Mohenjo-daro, that bitumen. It comes back later in the worst possible way, just to the north of the Great Bath. On that same citadel mound stood another monumental structure. Archaeologists called it the Great Granary. They imagined a vast storehouse, a testament to agricultural surplus and centralized planning. It consisted of a series of 27 rectangular brick platforms arranged in a grid, with narrow passageways between them for air circulation. The idea was that wooden superstructures would have been built on these platforms to hold the city's grain safe from floods and pests, held enough barley and wheat to feed the entire population of 40,000 for a year. A staggering feat of logistics and foresight. Granary was the city's insurance policy against drought and famine. Economic stability, a communal safety net managed for the benefit of all. However, newer interpretations have emerged. Some researchers, examining the layout and lack of clear grain residues, now suggest this may not have been a granary at all, but a great hall, marketplace, or administrative center. Is fierce, but regardless of its exact function, the scale and precision of the building are undeniable, of immense public importance, a hub of economic or civic life. Underscores a central mystery. Who organized this? Who managed the collection, storage, and distribution of a city's worth of grain? Where were the overlords, the tax collectors, the royal seal? We find none. This is a forward hook with profound implications. Of Mohenjo-daro is a ghost in the machine, invisible yet everywhere in its effects. Now let us descend from the citadel and walk into the lower city, into the neighborhoods where the people lived. The genius of Mohenjo-daro becomes intimate, becomes personal. Are not the mud huts of a primitive settlement. They are substantial dwellings, often 2 stories high, a material so consistent it boggles the mind. The standard baked brick of Mohenjo-daro. Across the entire city, and in fact across the entire Indus Valley civilization from Harappa to Lothal, conforms to a precise ratio. Are 4 to 2 to 1. The length is twice the width, and the width is twice the height. An accident. This was mass production on an industrial scale. Standardization meant bricks from one house could fit perfectly into another. That construction was faster, more efficient, a uniformly high quality. Of a civilization with universal standards, a common technological language spoken from the mountains to the sea. The houses were inward, looking, built around central courtyards that provided light and privacy. The walls were thick, providing insulation from the fierce Sind heat. Were small and set high, opening onto the inner courtyards, not the streets. The outside facades were plain, uniform. City streets a remarkably modern, almost austere appearance. And personality of a family were displayed inside, in their courtyards and their possessions, not in gaudy exterior displays. This created a streetscape of remarkable equality, a visual harmony that reinforced social cohesion. But step through a doorway, enter a world of surprising modern comfort. A typical larger home, you would find a staircase leading to an upper floor, where the family likely slept. On the ground floor, you would find rooms for cooking and living. And in a corner, find something that would not become standard in European homes for another 4,000 years, a private bathroom. Corner screened off, but a dedicated brick, paved room with a sloped floor. Set into a perfect brick culvert was a toilet, likely a wooden seat placed over a terracotta pipe. And next to it, in a small alcove, was a bathing area. From both did not simply spill onto the street or into a pit. This is where the true magic of Mohenjo-daro reveals itself. Was connected to a city-wide subterranean network, a labyrinth of agony and genius. The sewer system, from each house, the terracotta drain pipes from toilets and baths fed into a larger, covered brick drain that ran beneath the lanes. Secondary drains then fed into even larger main sewers that ran under the major streets. The entire system was built with a careful gradient to carry waste and wastewater out of the city and into the Indus River or into large soak pits and cesspits at the edges of town. Manholes, built with clever core-built brick arches, were placed at regular intervals so that the system could be inspected and cleaned, were heavy stone slabs. A crude ditch. This was a meticulously engineered public health infrastructure. It meant that the streets of Mohenjo-daro were clean of the filth and disease that plagued medieval European cities millennia later. Fresh water was not contaminated by human waste. It represented an understanding of germ theory, of the link between sanitation and health, millennia ahead of its time. The archaeologist E. J.H. Mackay, excavating in the 1930s, wrote that he felt a sense of profound humility uncovering these drains, realizing the ancient minds that conceived them were solving problems his own Victorian ancestors had only recently begun to address. Where it gets even more fascinating. The water for these homes, for bathing and drinking, come from the potentially contaminated river. It came from fresh, clean sources within the city itself. Daro had an astonishing number of wells. Over 700 have been discovered so far. They were built with the same standard bricks, circular linings. Many of the larger homes had their own private well in the courtyard, a mark of significant status. Wells were located at street corners for communal use. This was a city that mastered hydrology, that understood the water table, provided fresh water with an efficiency that puts many modern cities to shame. Think of the daily rhythm. Resident wakes in their multi-story home uses their private toilet, the waste vanishing into a subterranean world of flowing water. Fresh water from their own well in the courtyard to wash. They step out onto a clean, orderly street, planned to catch the breeze. Towards the citadel, seeing the great bath gleaming in the sun, a symbol of communal purity. They walk past the massive granary, knowing their food supply is secure. This was not a life of mere survival. Engineered comfort, of civic peace, of astonishing technological assurance. But this perfection, this serene order, fine question. What kind of mind builds such a system? What kind of event could possibly destroy it? The bricks tell a story of brilliance. The soil around them holds a darker secret, a clue to a catastrophe that was already brewing, even at the height of the city's glory. Standardization that made them strong may have also made them vulnerable. We have seen the stage. Now we must meet the players. Who were the people who lived in these perfect houses? What did they believe in? What did they trade? What did they create? What did they fear? Lie not in grand tombs, but in tiny enigmatic objects found in the ruins. Seals, beads, and a script that has never been read into the mind of Mohenjo-daro begins now. What we find there will challenge our very definition of civilization itself. So, who were the people who walked these serene streets? City just before dawn, the air still cool from the Indus night. In a house along a quiet lane, a woman stirs. She does not rise from a bed of straw or animal skins, as her contemporaries across the world might. She wraps herself in a piece of cloth, woven from a plant that will one day clothe the world. The people of Mohenjo-daro were the first known humans to cultivate cotton, to spin its fibers, and to weave them into fabric. A tiny fragment of this very cloth, preserved by a freak accident of chemistry, was found stuck to a silver vase in the tomb of Queen Pwabi in faraway Sumer, a testament to a trade link we will explore in a moment. Wear rough wool or heavy flax by default. They chose comfort. They chose a breathable, lightweight textile that speaks of a sophisticated understanding of materials, and a desire for everyday elegance is only the beginning. After dressing, she might select her ornaments for the day. Her choices were dazzling. Carved box, she could take bangles carved from seashells, or perhaps bangles of copper or bronze that jingled softly on her arm. She might choose necklaces of gleaming carnelian, a deep red stone that was drilled with astonishing precision, so fine the drill holes are almost invisible to the naked eye. She might fasten a clasp of gold or string beads of brilliant blue lapis lazuli, a stone that had traveled over 1,000 kilometers from the mines of Badakhshan in modern Afghanistan. The jewelry of a primitive society. This was the jewelry of a connected, wealthy, and aesthetically refined people. Every bead was a piece of a vast economic puzzle. Is where the mystery deepens. Where are their kings, their pharaohs, buried with such treasures? They are nowhere to be found. Was worn by the living, not hoarded for the dead. This simple fact turns our understanding of ancient power upside down, downstairs, are already awake, are scattered on a clean brick floor. Small clay cart, complete with solid wheels, a miniature version of the carts that would have rumbled through the city streets, pulled by sturdy humped cattle. There is a tiny bull, modeled, a small, hollow bird. Bring it to your lips and blow, and it produces a clear, piercing whistle. Children at play, the same sound heard in any modern park, echoed off these ancient walls over 4,000 years ago. These were not grim, joyless people surviving in a harsh world. This was a society that had the security, the surplus, to make toys for its children. The artisans of the city were at work as the sun climbed higher. Small workshop, a potter turns his wheel. He does not create simple, utilitarian vessels. His pots are thin-walled, symmetrical, to a beautiful red or buff color. With a hand steadied by generations of practice, he paints. His designs are not random. Precise geometric patterns, intersecting circles, pipal leaves, and sometimes the haunting image of a unicorn, a stylized creature that appears again and again on the artifacts of this civilization. Pottery was mass-produced, yet it maintained a high standard of quality and artistry. For everyday use in homes across the city, meaning even an ordinary meal was served on what we would consider fine, decorated tableware. Standardization of beauty is a profound concept, reserved for an elite. It was a common civic experience. But what of their art, their vision of themselves and their world? Found in the ruins, give us a fleeting, breathtaking glimpse. The first is small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, known as the dancing girl. Using the lost wax method, she is not a queen or a goddess. She is a young woman, captured in a moment of assured defiance. She stands with one hand on her hip, her legs slightly forward as if caught in mid-motion. She wears nothing but a necklace and a stack of bangles that climb all the way up her left arm. Her hair is styled in a complicated braid that rests on her shoulder, but it is her face that stops you. Her expression is one of supreme confidence, almost a challenge. Gregory Possehl called her the most captivating piece of art from the Indus Valley. She is not an idealized symbol. She is an individual with personality and attitude, frozen in metal for millennia. She tells us they valued observation, they valued the human form, and they valued capturing a moment of life. The second object is a statuette known as the priest, king. From a piece of white steatite, it is a figure of quiet, inscrutable authority. A robe draped over one shoulder, decorated with a trefoil pattern, a design that may have been filled with red paste to make it stand out, is carefully combed back and held by a simple headband, is neatly trimmed. But his eyes are what hold you. They are half closed, looking inward, suggesting contemplation rather than brute force. Depicted with weapons. He is not depicted on a throne. His authority seems to stem from something else, something ritualistic or spiritual. A king, a community leader. We do not know. He embodies the central enigma of Mohenjo-daro. We can see the power, but we cannot name it. We can see the order, but we cannot find the throne. And this absence of obvious, glorified rulers is a clue that will become critical later. Remember that face, its calm detachment. It comes back later in the most unsettling way. The wealth that adorned the people, the materials that filled the workshops did not spring from the local soil. Daro was the beating heart of a commercial empire. Its traders were its lifeblood in the lower town. A merchant prepares a shipment. Small square seal carved from steatite. On it is an image of that iconic unicorn, along with a short line of mysterious symbols, ciphered script of the Indus Valley. This seal into a soft clay tag attached to a bundle of goods. Perhaps a bolt of that precious cotton cloth, a string of finished carnelian beads. Was his signature, his brand, his guarantee of quality. And these seals traveled, found in the ruins of ancient Mesopotamian cities like Ur, hundreds of miles to the west estimated. Cuneiform tablets from the court of King Sargon of Akkad speak of ships from a land called Meluha, a land of exotic goods. Meluha is almost certainly the Indus Valley. The Mesopotamians received timber, copper, gold, ivory, and carnelian from Meluha. The people of Mohenjo-daro may have received silver, tin, and luxury oils. This was not haphazard barter. This was organized, distance commerce conducted by weight and measure, using the standardized weights we saw in the previous section. In Mohenjo-daro could trust that a weight marked in his city would be honored in a port on the Persian Gulf. This implies treaties, agreements, and a shared language of trade that transcended their own unreadable script. Their world was interconnected in ways we are only beginning to appreciate. But here is a question that will haunt us. What stories did they tell as those trade ships sailed down the Indus? What prayers did they whisper for their safe return? But it is silent, and a silent script is a locked door to a people's soul we see. The physical evidence of a rich, comfortable, daily life. We see artistry, playfulness, and commercial genius. But we do not hear their voices, we do not know their names, their laws, their poetry, fears. Civilization operates like a magnificent machine, perfectly engineered, instruction manual written in a language we cannot comprehend. Between what we can see and what we can understand is the central drama of Mohenjo-daro. We are left with a profound unease. All of this comfort, all of this trade, all of this art was built upon a foundation we cannot see. A social contract, a belief system, a shared dream so powerful it created this urban paradise. And that foundation, whatever it was, firm for centuries. But what happens when a dream that powerful begins to fade? What happens when the seals stop being stamped? When the cotton fields stop being tended? When the careful balance of this great machine is thrown off? Does not lie in a sudden invasion or a dramatic battle. In something slower, something more insidious, already hinted at by the very bricks of the city. To understand the end, first understand the mind. Stand the mind, we must finally confront the one artifact that mocks us with its silence, the script. Chapter of our journey takes us into the heart of the greatest linguistic puzzle on Earth. The enigmatic silence of their script, we turn to the eloquent stones of their city. If their words are lost to us, their world is not. The very layout of Mohenjo-daro screams a truth that contradicts everything we know about ancient empires. Walk with me through these grid-patterned streets. Look to the left and right. Where are the towering palaces? Where are the grandiose temples dedicated to mighty gods? Where are the statues of conquerors, the monuments to victory and dominion? Not here. In their place, we see a profound uniformity, a repetition of modest, built homes stretching as far as the eye can see. This is the first clue to a mystery that has baffled archaeologists for generations. A civilization of millions spanning an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, without leaving a single trace of a king. The world around Mohenjo-daro in the centuries between 2500 BCE. In Egypt, pharaohs were building pyramids that pierced the heavens, monuments to their divine power that consumed the labor of thousands. In Mesopotamia, mighty kings like Sargon of Akkad were erecting steles carved with images of their triumphs, their armies marching across conquered lands. Warfare and hierarchy were etched into the very identity of these cultures. Yet here in the Indus Valley, we find none of that. No depictions of battle on their seals, no fortified citadels designed for a ruling elite, no treasure-laden tombs. We find the Great Bath, a large public pool, perhaps used for ritual purification, accessible to many. Massive granaries, suggesting collective storage and distribution of grain. We find a city that seems to have been designed for the people. But who were these people, and how did they govern themselves without the iron fist of a monarch? The answer may lie in the bricks. In Mohenjo-daro, and indeed across the Indus cities, conforms to a standard ratio. The dimensions are consistent, a single blueprint. This standardization extends to the houses themselves. While there is variation, the differences in house size are subtle, not dramatic. There are no sprawling mansions next to hovels. Jonathan Mark Kenoyer, who has spent decades excavating at Harappa, that the largest houses are only about twice the size of the smallest ones. In a world where royal palaces could be 1,000 times larger than a peasant's hut, this near equality is staggering. It's a society where wealth was distributed relatively evenly, where social stratification was minimal. An ancient city where a merchant, a craftsman, and a farmer might live in homes of comparable comfort. What kind of social contract made this possible? But the real proof of their organizational genius is not in their bricks, but in their weights. Scattered across the ruins of Mohenjo-daro Harappa, Lothal and dozens of other sites archaeologists have unearthed small cubes of chert, a hard stone, weights. And they are not random. They follow a precise and uniform system. Unit weighs about 13.7 grams. Larger weights are multiples of this unit, following a binary and decimal system. 2 units, 4 units, 8 units, and so on up to large weights of 320 units and more. Now here is the astonishing part. These identical weight systems have been found at sites separated by thousands of kilometers, from the foothills of the Himalayas to the coast of the Arabian Sea. This standardization persisted for centuries, with minimal variation. A merchant in Mohenjo-daro could trade with a merchant in distant Dolavira using the same weights. The same measures, confidence. This was a vast economic zone, a common market operating with a reliability that would not be seen again until the Roman Empire of years later. And this is only the beginning. What this implies: to maintain such uniformity across a continent, there must have been a central authority, right? A powerful king or a priestly class enforcing the standards. But where is the evidence of that authority? Where are the administrative centers, the tax records, the decrees? The Indus script, as we know, unreadable, so we cannot find royal proclamations. A story of incredible coordination. Scholar Gregory Parsial, in his book, The Indus Civilization. A contemporary perspective, that this may point to a form of corporate society, where power was not vested in a single individual, but in groups, perhaps councils of elders, guilds of merchants, or boards of planners. A civilization run not by a god-king, but by committee. A civilization where decisions were made collectively, for the collective good, a modern ideal. But here it is, etched in stone 4,500 years ago. Linger on that thought for a moment, a society without extreme inequality, a society with standardized trade measures across a huge region, that built advanced cities without glorifying war or conquestimated. What held it all together? What was the glue that bound the people of the Indus Valley into this remarkable, cohesive whole? A shared religious belief. But where are the temples? The Great Bath might have been a ritual site, the iconography of a temple dedicated to a specific deity. Powerful economic incentive. The thriving trade in lapis lazuli, carnelian, and cotton certainly created wealth. That wealth does not seem to have concentrated in a few hands. Was it a sophisticated legal code? A set of rules so ingrained that everyone followed them without the need for constant enforcement? We do not know, but the absence of evidence is itself evidence. The absence of palaces suggests the absence of autocrats. Absence of battle scenes suggests a culture that valued peace, or at least did not celebrate war. Of grandiose tombs suggests that they did not believe in an afterlife where material wealth mattered. Or perhaps they believed in something else entirely, something we have yet to comprehend. Remember that number, 13.7 grams. It comes back later in the worst possible way. For now, consider the daily life in this seemingly egalitarian world. A baker in Mohenjo-daro. He wakes in a house made of standardized bricks with a courtyard and a well for water. Standardized weights to measure grain from the public granary. It's bread in a standardized oven. He walks on streets laid out in a standardized grid. He might visit the Great Bath for a ritual cleanse. He might engage in trade with a sailor from Lothal using those same cubic weights to measure goods. There is order, there is comfort, predictability. But where is the tension? Conflict. Human societies are never without conflict. So how did they manage it? A council that mediated disputes? Did they have a system of justice that left no physical trace? The artifacts show us toys, jewelry, but no weapons of war on a massive scale. To a society that had mastered social harmony to a degree unmatched in the ancient world. But here is where it gets worse, or perhaps more intriguing. For such a system to work, it must have been incredibly stable, have been built on a foundation of shared values so strong that it could withstand the test of centuries. And it did. Daro and its sister cities thrived for over 700 years, is longer than the Roman Empire lasted in the West estimated. This was not a fleeting experiment, a sustained achievement. Yet this very stability might hide a fatal weakness, a society that depends on perfect balance, on unwavering adherence to norms, might be fragile in the face of sudden change. What happens when the climate shifts? What happens when trade routes are disrupted? What happens when the shared dream that built those uniform bricks begins to fracture? With a haunting question. Did the people of Mohenjo-daro, in their pursuit of harmony, create a system so rigid that it could not adapt? Worked beautifully until it did not. Dive deeper into the mystery of their governance. The uniformity we see is not accidental, result of meticulous planning and relentless maintenance. Archaeologists have found that the city's drainage system, a marvel of engineering, required constant care. Every household was connected to it, and every citizen must have understood the importance of keeping it clean. Implies a level of civic responsibility that is extraordinary. In Mohenjo-daro take pride in their city's functioning. Was there a sense of collective ownership that transcended individual ambition? Scholar Jane Mincy-Intosh, in her book The Ancient Indus Valley New Perspectives, that the Indus civilization may have been a theater state where ritual and ceremony, rather than coercion, maintained social order. With its sophisticated water management, might have been the stage for such rituals, binding the community together through shared practice rather than through fear of a ruler. The evidence from seals. Thousands of steatite seals have been found, carved with images of animals, mythical beasts, ciphered script. These were likely used in trade to mark goods and signify ownership. But notably, none of these seals depict human figures in positions of authority, no priests receiving homage. Common image is that of a unicorn-like creature, a symbol that appears across the civilization. Be a corporate logo, a marker of guilds or clans that managed trade and production. If so, power was diffuse, spread among various groups that cooperated under a common cultural umbrella. This heterarchy, a system where multiple sources of power exist without a strict hierarchy, might explain the lack of a central palace. That challenges our very understanding of early state formation. But remember, this system lasted for centuries, a chaotic free for all. There must have been rules, and there must have been ways to enforce them. How did they deal with crime? Settle disputes. We have no courts, no prisons, no law codes inscribed on stone. Perhaps their justice was administered locally, in each neighborhood, leaving no monumental trace. Their social norms were so internalized that deviation was rare. The sheer scale of their standardization, however, suggests enforcement. Someone was checking those weights, ensuring they matched the standard. Someone was overseeing the brick production, making sure every brick fit the ratio. Was this the work of a benevolent bureaucracy, by citizens chosen for their merit? We can only speculate. But the absence of glorified rulers does not mean the absence of organization. The organization was of a different kind, one that valued the collective over the individual, the system over the sovereign, where the mystery deepens. For in our world, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yet here in the Indus Valley, power seems to have been distributed in a way that prevented such corruption, or at least left no evidence of it. A conscious choice from the conflicts of their neighbors. Or was it a unique product of their environment, their history, their beliefs? These questions open, and they tug at us, demanding answers that the stones are reluctant to give. The children of Mohenjo-daro. They played with clay carts and miniature animals, toys that have been found in abundance, in a world of straight lines and predictable rhythms. They learned trades from their parents, perhaps in workshops that produced beads of carnelian or vessels of pottery. The standard weights and measures, the unspoken rules of civic life. They participated in rituals at the Great Bath, ceremonies that reinforced their place in the community. For generation after generation, this way of life continued. It was normal. It was stable. In their eyes, permanent. But beneath this surface of stability, forces were at work, geological forces. Climatic forces, forces that no committee, no council, no amount of social harmony could control. The rivers that fed their fields, that filled their wells, these were the true masters of Mohenjo-daro. masters were not always kind. Archaeological studies of sediment cores from the region, led by researchers like Liviu Giosan of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, reveal a story of environmental change. Indus River, the lifeblood of the civilization, began to shift its course. Monsoon patterns fluctuated. There is evidence of both floods and droughts in the later periods. For a society built on precision, on the careful management of water and grain, such unpredictability would have been a profound shock that once ensured food security might have emptied. The drainage systems might have failed under silt or flood waters. The trade networks that brought wealth might have frayed as routes became impassable. Material foundation trembles, the social foundation cannot remain steady. The shared dream, belief that held the society together, would have been put to the ultimate test. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. For now, let us hold on to the image of Mohenjo-daro at its height. A civilization that dared to be different. A civilization that built cities without castles, that traded across continents without conquering, that created wealth without hoarding it in the hands of a few. As a silent challenge to our assumptions about human nature and society. Were they ahead of their time? Or were they on a path that humanity abandoned, a path of cooperation and equality that we have yet to rediscover? Lie not just in their ruins, but in the very reasons for their decline. And as we turn to that final chapter, prepare for a revelation that is as subtle as it is devastating. The fall of Mohenjo-daro was not a sudden cataclysm, but a slow unraveling, a whisper that grew into a silence. The slow unraveling begins not with a bang, but with a departure. Imagine the last day, the sun beats down on the baked brick. A small clay cart is left in a corner of a courtyard. A potter, perhaps, abandons a half-finished vessel on his wheel. The public well is used one final time, the rope leaving its last groove in the stone. Silence, the streets, once bustling with 100,000 souls, fall quiet. The gates are not broken, but they are left open. Sits empty, its sacred water slowly evaporating under the relentless sun. By around 1900 before Common Era, Daro is a ghost city. Valley civilization, a network of over 1,000 settlements spanning an area larger than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, begins to dim. City like lights going out across a vast landscape. What force could make people walk away from their homes, their temples, their perfectly planned lives? This is the central mystery, with pieces that do not quite fit, a crime scene 5,000 years cold. And every theory leads us down a darker path. The first suspect is the land itself, the very river that gave the civilization its life and its name. River, that mighty coursing vein of water, was not a fixed entity. Satellite imagery and geological core samples tell a story of a restless giant. The geologist Liviu Giosan and his team, a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, describe an ancient climate shift. The mighty monsoon rains that fed the Indus and its tributaries began to weaken. They argue became unpredictable. They shifted course, sometimes dramatically. What was once a thriving port could become a stagnant backwater. Farmlands, meticulously watered by canals, could turn to dust or be buried under silt. Built on hydrological precision, could not survive hydrological chaos. The evidence is in the bricks. Later levels of construction at Mohenjo-daro show a desperate adaptation, mud brick replacing the standardized fired brick, of declining resources and centralized control. The city was fighting a losing battle against its own environment, plugging breaches, raising floors against floods. But eventually, the water won entirely. A prolonged drought would have been a slow, suffocating end. Fail, the granaries empty, the social contract, that remarkable peace, strains under the weight of hunger. Begun to leave, not all at once, but in a gradual, relentless trickle migrating towards more reliable water sources, east towards the Ganges Plain. Quiet, tragic theory of climate change and resilience failing. But here is where the story takes a violent turn. Another explanation dominated the textbooks, one that involved not a changing climate, but a conquering people. The controversial Aryan invasion theory, proposed by scholars like Sir Mortimer Wheeler in the 1940s, it paints a stark picture. To a group of skeletons found in the streets of Mohenjo-daro, some with signs of trauma as evidence of a final massacre. Nomadic, horse, riding warriors from the Central Asian steppes, the Aryans, sweeping down through the mountain passes, with them a new culture, a new language, Sanskrit, and a new social order. Ran the peaceful, urban Indus people, he argued, and ushered in a new Vedic age in India. Wheeler famously declared that the Vedic god Indra, the fort destroyer, was accused by the ancient texts themselves. It was a compelling narrative, one that explained cultural change through conquestimated, but then the plot thickens. Archaeologists like George Dales in the 1960s examined those same skeletons with a more critical eye. Massacre victims. They were found in disorganized layers, not together in a final battle. Some were in abandoned buildings, others in streets. There was no concentration of weapons, no evidence of a great military assault on the city. Argued these were not victims of a single invasion, but perhaps people who died during the city's decline, from disease or conflict, properly buried in the chaotic final years. The invasion theory began to crumble under its own lack of evidence. Studies of modern populations in the region further complicate the picture, showing a complex mixing of peoples over millennia, not a clear replacement. Most scholars see the Aryan migration, if it occurred, as a more gradual and complex process, a sudden wave of destruction that toppled Mohenjo-daro. The city was likely already empty, or nearly so, by the time new cultural influences arrived. But the mystery of those final bodies remains. Footnote: a group of 44 individuals, men, women, and children, found in a strangely contorted state in a low-lying part of the city, has a deep cut mark on its skull. Another lies with its hands over its face. Chilling scene, frozen in time. Were they fleeing a flood, caught in a sudden deluge? Of a local conflict, a symptom of the social breakdown in the city's last days? Or were they struck down by disease? We may never know. Their silent forms are a raw shock test, each generation projecting its own fears onto them, from Wheeler's vision of barbarian hordes to modern visions of societal collapse. Skeletons, because they are a direct line to the final human moments of this story. The timeline itself is a battlefield of science. Radiocarbon dating, the great clock of archaeology, has fueled intense debates. Samples from different sites, from different layers, a range of dates for the civilization's end. It declines starting as early as 2100 before Common Era, a process lasting centuries. Point to a more abrupt end closer to 1900. Academic quibbling, it is crucial. A slow decline points to environmental or economic causes. A rapid collapse opens the door to more catastrophic events. Some have even proposed a cosmic airburst, a meteorite explosion over the city, to finds of melted pottery and mud brick, though this remains a fringe theory. Likely lies in the middle a slow burn with occasional crises. The cities of the Indus did not fall in a single year, but they did fall, rebuilt. Of life vanished, and this brings us to the greatest loss, a silence more profound than the empty streets. The Indus Valley script, found on thousands of seals, tablets, and pottery fragments, remains undeciphered. Door. We see the symbols, elegant depictions of animals, abstract signs, but we cannot hear the words. Person who could read those signs died, an entire world of thought vanished. We lost their stories, their laws. We lost their prayers, their poetry, their names for their gods and their children. Their history in their own words. Did they have epic tales? Philosophical texts? Were their seals not just mercantile labels, but religious incantations? Or the famous priest, king statue, and we do not know his name, his title, or his power. We look at the Great Bath, and we can only guess at the rituals performed there. Is the ultimate open loop a question mark etched in steatite? Every attempt to crack the code, from early efforts by scholars like Ascoparpala to modern computational analysis, has run into the same wall. Are too short. We have no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual inscription. Their voice is forever muted. The true tragedy of Mohenjo-daro. We can admire their plumbing, but we cannot know their hearts. Their cities, but we cannot walk in their minds. The loss is incalculable, erasure of a chapter from the human story. And this leads us to the final, haunting question. What does the fall of Mohenjo-daro tell us about ourselves? This was not a primitive tribe wiped out by a natural disaster. Arguably the most sophisticated, peaceful, and planned civilization of its time, perhaps of any time before the modern era. And yet endure, whispers a warning about the fragility of complexity. A society built on such fine balance, on precise water management and long-distance trade, is vulnerable to the slightest tremor in those systems. When the environment changed, their brilliant adaptation became their Achilles' heel. Their apparent lack of a centralized, militaristic authority, a strength that fostered equality, may have become a weakness in a crisis, a strong ruler to coordinate a desperate response, or to marshal resources for defense. A masterpiece of social engineering, but even masterpieces can be undone by a shifting foundation. The ongoing archaeological efforts, now led by Pakistani and international teams, are no longer just about uncovering grandeur. They are forensic investigations into a failure. They use isotope analysis on teeth to trace ancient migration patterns. Remains to reconstruct diet and climate. They map the ancient river courses with ground, penetrating radar. Each new discovery adds a brushstroke to the picture of decline. They are not just digging for artifacts, digging for answers to a question that resonates in our own time. Climate anxiety, of global supply chains, of social fragmentation. The story of Mohenjo-daro feels less like ancient history and more like a parable. That no civilization, no matter how advanced, is immune to the forces of nature or the consequences of its own success, is a mirror. We see our own potential for creation and our own vulnerability. Our world on their foundations, on the idea of the city, of standardized weights, of trade and craftsmanship. But we also inherited the peril of ignoring the delicate systems that sustain us. Settled on the abandoned streets of Mohenjo-daro, slowly buried the great bath, and the wind whispered through the empty granaries. Something remarkable happened. The civilization vanished. Legacy did not. Indus culture seeped into the subcontinent's DNA. The worship of proto-Shiva figures, the reverence for trees and animals, pottery and bead making lived on in the villages that persisted. Of the city of order and community never died. It would rise again in different forms under different names. Mohenjo-daro was not an end, but a beginning that was forgotten, a first draft of urban humanity that was thousands of years ahead of its time. Our deepest assumptions, that war and monumental kings are not prerequisites for greatness. It proves that equality and planning can build wonders. Fall proves that no achievement is permanent. So as we pull back, leaving the silent bricks under the Pakistani sun, with a profound duality, at what was built and humility at what was lost, the people of Mohenjo-daro looked at a river and saw not just water, but a blueprint for a better world. That world, and for 1,000 years they lived in it. Then the world changed, and their blueprint could not be redrawn. They walked away, leaving their city as a message in clay and stone. A message that says we are capable of extraordinary collaboration. And a warning that says even the most extraordinary collaboration is still at the mercy of the earth, the sky, and the relentless flow of time, is not just theirs. Human story, a story of brilliance, of silence, and of an echo that still asks us, across 5,000 years, what we are building. It will last. Daro, the lost city of the Indus. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to our channel for more fascinating documentaries on history, science, civilizations, mysteries, and the untold stories that shaped our world. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new release. Until next time.